Mahamuniya Swaka Teyata Om Muni Muni Mahamuniya Swaka.
I would like to express my greetings and warm welcome. Okay. So as a usual practice, at the beginning, the recitation or chanting some Buddhist text. Now this time, as a Theravada country, some Thai. How many Thai? Raise hand. How many Thai? No, raise hand. Okay, okay. So, firstly, you see, you chant the Pali, the Mangalam Sutra. Kande ibe, kande ya, kande ibe. Shouldn't you be? Thank you. So first, the recitation or chanting as the Mangalam Sutra in Pali language. Then today, the Panchaparamita Sutra, Heart Sutra, recite in Chinese. Then tomorrow, Vietnamese. Day after tomorrow, now, more and more, how to say, English speaking, also showing interest about, the Buddha Dharma. So, day after tomorrow, recite Heart Sutra in English. Okay. So, please, recite.
Excuse me, everybody. My name is Pravesh. I'm from Thailand, and we from Thailand, and we will chanting for Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha.
Haritona metang sameta padantan avijita jita paritang pananton sake kamen charupe kirisi karatate chantarike vimanen Tiperate chakame tarvanakane kevatumhi keten Umachiyantu Devan Charantara Visameya Kakantapanaka Dedanta Santike Yang Muni Chavachanang Sadhavome Sunantun Dhammasavana Karo Ayam Badantan Dhammasavana Karo Ayam Badantan Dhammasavana Karo Ayam Badantan Namayang Buddhassa Bhagavato
มุปภาคณมะกรังกโรมาเส
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะ
บุตทังสรณัง
กัจฉามิธัมมังสรณังกัจฉามิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิทุติยมปิบุตทังสรณังกัจฉามิทุติยมปิธัมมังสรณังกัจฉามิทุติยมปิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิตันติยมปิพุทธังสรณังกัจฉามิตันติยมปิสังสรณังกัจฉามิตันติยมปิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิ
เสวนาจัมบา
รานังบัณฑิตานันจะเสวนาปุยชาจะปุยชนิยานังเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังบดิโรบเทสวะโสจะบุตเปจักตะปุญญาตาตัสสัมมาปณิจเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังพาหุสัจจัญญเสปันตวินัยย่อยยสุเสกโตสุภาสิตาจยาวัยเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังมาตาบิโดปาทานังปุตตดาราชสังฆหัวอนาคุราชกัมมันตาเอตัมมังกรมุตตมันทานันจะธรรมจริยาจยาตกานันจะสังฆหัวอนวัจจานิกามานิเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังอารันเดวิรติปาปามาจปานาจะสัญญโมปมาโทจะกรรมเมสุเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังคารวจะนิวาโดยจะสันตัวเทจักตัญยุตากาเรนธรรมสวานังเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังคันเตียนจะโสวจะเสตัมมังกรมุตตมังดาโพดาพระมจริยาจาริยสัจจานาทาสนังเนมปานาสัจจิกิริยาจเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังพุทธัสสะโรกธรรมเมหิจิตตังยาสนากัมปะเดียโสกังวิราชังเขมังเอตัมมังกรมุตตมังเอนทันติสานนาสาพันธมาปราจิตาสาพันธโสทิงขาชันติดันเตสังมังคารมุตตมันติอิติปิโสภะคะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธเวชัยจรณะสัมปันโนสุขโตโรกวิโตอนุตตรปุริสธรรมสารติสัทธาเทวมนุสานังพุทโธภะคะวะติสวากาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมสันติติโกอาการิโกเอหิปัสสิโกวัมปนายโกปัจจตังเวทิตาโบเวญโยเรเตสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆ
ฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆยายะปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสามีจิปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆจตาริปุริสยุคานิอาถาปุริสัมโภคาราเหสัพพะคะวะกสังโฆอาหุนายโยปาหุนายโยทักขินายโยอัญชริกรณิโยอนุตตรังปุญญาเขตังโรกัสสันติบาหุงสหัสสมาปิเนมิตาสาวุฒานดังเรียเมฆรังวดิดาขวารยเสนามารันทานทิตามวิทินาจิตวามุเนนโดยดันเดยสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิรันติเรกมปิโยติตัสสะปรันติงโครัมปนารวะกมังอัตตยาคังกันเดสุดันดวิทินาจิตวามุเนนโดยดันเดยสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิรังกิเรงกชาวรังอติมันดาพุทธันดาวังกิจังกรรมสเนวสุธารุนันตังเมตัมบุเสกวิตินาชิตาวามุเนนโดยตันเดยสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิอุงเขตกากรรมติหาตสุธารุนันตันทาวันติโยจันปทางกุริมาระวันตังเทเปสังกตมโนจิตวามุเนนโดตันเตยสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิสัจจนาการตมุตรังเยวกาปินิยาเจนจายทัวสวัจนังจยกายมาเจสันเดนสมวิทินาชิตาวามุเนนโดยดานเดนสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิจังวิหายมติสัจจกวาดเกตุงวาทาปิโรปิตมนังตะพุตังปัญญาปเดียมจริโตจิตวามุเนนโดยตันเดยสังดุเรชยมังคารานินันโทปนันตปุจกังวิพุทธังมเหเตปุเตนะเทระปุจเกนเจโตปันเดสเวทินาชิตวามุเนนโดยดันเดนจัสสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิอเดติปุจเกนะสุธาตาทังพระมังวิสุทธิจุติเมติภคัมปิทานังญาณกเตนะวิทินายิตวามุเนนโดยดันเดยสะภวตุเตชยมังคารานิวิปุณดจยมังคารากหันทายโยวาจโยทินาทินเนสรเตมทันเดหิตวานันเอกวิวิธานิจุปันทวานิโมขังสุขังอธิกมายนันสัพพัญโยมหาการุณิโกนันทวหิตายสัพปานินางปุเรตวาปารเมสัพพาปัตโตสัมโพธิโมตตมังเนเตนะสัจวะเจนะโหตุเตชยมังคารังชยันโตโพธิยามเลสักนังนันติวัตโนเอวังดวังวิชโยโหหิชยาสุชยมังอปราจิตบาลังเกสีเสปตวิปกเรพิเสเกสัพพุทธานังอาคาปะตัวปโมยอากาตังสมังคารังสุปาพาตังสุหุนสุกันโนสุมโหตัวจะสุเยทังพระมจาริสุปทากินังกายกรรมังวาจากรรมังปะทังกินังปะทังกินังมโนกรรมังปเนเกเตปะทังกินังปะทังกินานิกัตตวานรพันตเทป ปัฏฐาคินเนภวตุสัพพมังคารังกันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพพุทธานุภาเวนัสสัทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุสัพพมังคารังราคันตุสัพพเทวตาสัพพมานุภาเวนัสสัทธาโสทิภวันตุเตภวตุสัพพมังคารังราคันตุสัพวัตตาสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนัสสัทธาโสทิภวันตุเต
Thank you. Now Chinese. 거기서 가야 돼. 되면서 가. 오케이.
아미도 신경 관自在菩萨行深般若波罗蜜多时照见五蕴皆空度一切苦舍利子舍不异空空不异舍舍即是空空即是舍受想行识亦复如是舍利子是诸法空相不生不灭不垢不净不增不减是故空中无色无受想行识无眼耳鼻舌身意无色行识无思所无见乃至无意识界无明乃至
aggregates are empty of intrinsic existence. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form too is not other than emptiness. Likewise, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness are all empty. Therefore, Shariputra, all phenomena are empty. They are without defining characteristic. They are not born. They do not cease. They are not defiled. They are not undefiled. They are not deficient. And they are not complete. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no mental formation, no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There is no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no texture, and no mental objects. There is no element, high element, and so on, up to no mind element, including up to no mental element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, there is no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, no origination, cessation and path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, even no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since Bodhisattvas have no attainments, they rely on this perfection of wisdom and abide in it, having no obscuration in their minds. They have no fear, and by going utterly beyond error, they will reach the end of nirvana. All the Buddhas who wish to abide in the three times attained the full awakening of unexcelled perfect enlightenment by relying on this profound perfection of wisdom. Therefore, one should know that the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unexcelled mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that quells all suffering is true because it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed that Yatha Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, the great being, should train in the perfection of wisdom in this way. Thereupon, the Blessed One arose from that meditative absorption and commended the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, saying, "This is excellent, 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 O noble child. It is just so. It should be just so. One must practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have revealed." For even the Tathagatas will rejoice as the Blessed One uttered these words. The Venerable Shariputra. 보여주냐? 거기 타다 동문대. 거기 타다들 동문대 찍다기도 봐야 돼. The holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, along with the entire assembly, including the worlds of gods, humans, Ashuras, and Gandharvas, all rejoiced and hailed what the Blessed One had said.
Now a few sentences.
I pay homage to the mother of all the Buddhas, Prajnaparamita, which is inexpressible, ineffable, and inconceivable, beyond word expression. It's the perfection of wisdom.
Now two sentences. One, the material Buddhas, you see, also the writing, Apisamaya Alankara. See, it is Kasada. Kare, Shujusna Kare. Homage to Buddha. Or rather, I think the Buddha's wisdom. And then the Nagarjuna's Madhyamika Mulakarika is homage to Buddha. Mainly is a praise to Buddha because Buddha taught emptiness. So these two texts, most important texts which we study from childhood. I myself, at that time, rather very, very lazy student. But out of fear of my tutor's serious face, and also one weep. So I also, you see, the way study is learned by heart, memorize these texts. So these two texts are most important texts. So I usually recite these two sentences or shlokas. Homage. Homage Buddha. Nyende Jio Zono Nyeshi Tenze Ganyen Dandrola Pembara Chenam Lamshi Nige Jigden Dundro Zeva Kong Yanda Dembe Tumnam Namba Kunden Natso Tisu Nyende Chanju Sembe Tsoche Sanje. Is this? This is salutation from Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. So paying homage to the Buddha for teaching, the best of teachers, for teaching the dependent rising. Whatever is dependent rising is unceasing, unborn, undenied, impermanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual constructions, and peaceful. Tibetan. Okay. The very good translator, Chinese translator, then English translator, Vietnamese translator, Vietnamese translator, then Hindi translator, then Japanese translator, maybe there, and Korean translator. So, Then any other translation?
Portuguese.
Spanish translator, you're right.
Spanish, Yorel. Portuguese.
Oh.
Portuguese.
Oh, Portuguese, what I say? Okay.
I pay homage to the Gautama who taught the Holy Dharma to rid us of all distorted views out of his compassion. So we annually have this teaching for the people from Southeast Asian countries, mainly the Buddhist, traditionally Buddhist countries. We have this kind of discourse every year. So, with regard to Buddhism, the essence of Buddhism, so the essence of the teaching, which the Chinese have recite this verse, may the three poisons be eliminated, and may the light of wisdom shine, and may all the obstacles be eliminated, and may we engage in the Bodhisattva practices. And so, the first line, which says, may all the three poisons be eliminated or dispelled, shows that in the Indian spiritual traditions, what the practitioners see as an obstacle or enemy are the destructive emotions. And therefore, we have to practice, the foundation of which is morality, and then on the basis of that, cultivating single-pointed concentration, and on the basis of that, tries to overcome the negative emotions or attachment of the desire ram, and then also even in the non-Buddhist traditions, they practice and cultivate single-pointed concentration, which belong to the higher planes of existence. And then in Buddhism, ignorance is recognized or identified as the root of all the negative emotions, the destructive emotions. And therefore, when we say, may we dispel the three poisons, this is the root of the three poisons. And with regards to the different philosophical traditions of Buddhism, there are different interpretations of reality, and therefore, accordingly, there are different interpretations of the recognizing what is ignorance. In other words, the ignorance is said to be overcome only by wisdom. Wisdom which sees reality as it is, and therefore we have this prayer line which says, may all the three poisons be dispelled. And so you have to increase the light of wisdom, to recognizing or cognizing reality, and eliminate this. And then also the prayer says, may all the obstacles be overcome. And so with regard to this, of course, both the Pali and Sanskrit traditions have the same practice, which is to increase or to make this light of wisdom shine forth. We develop the wisdom realizing and selflessness. For that, we cultivate single-pointed concentration, which is done on the basis of cultivating or showing mindfulness and introspection. And therefore, in order to do these, cultivate mindfulness and introspection, we practice heedfulness, and on the basis of which we practice the morality, ethical morality. And therefore, these three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom are in a way common to, generally speaking, common to both Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions. The difference between these two traditions is the assertion of an Atman theory or an Anatman theory. And then with regard to the altruistic intention called Bodhisattva, which thinks of benefiting all sentient beings across the expanse of space and to overcome their suffering and to serve them. In order to be able to do that practically, we need, unless you are you have the complete knowledge and you have overcome all the delusions and all the defilements completely within your mind, and it's not possible to help others infinitely and effortlessly. And therefore, just as a teacher in a school needs to be fully knowledgeable in the subject that he or she is teaching, and unless that knowledge is there within the teacher himself or herself, they cannot teach. Likewise, we need to develop this the path, and we need to reach the state of enlightenment. And for that, we need to engage, or we need to enter the path of bodhisattvas. And therefore, in this prayer, we say, may we engage in the bodhisattva practices. And so here, in order to engage in the bodhisattva practices, practicing morality and practicing generosity, of course, something common to all. But in order for these practices of morality and concentration or giving to become a perfection of morality and perfection of giving, we need to complement these practices with bodhicitta, and along with it, it should be also helped by the understanding of selflessness or emptiness. And therefore, in the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, Shantideva goes through these 6 perfections, the paramitas, and also he goes through he explains about emptiness. So should we have tea first? And then the qualities of the Buddha is inconceivable, the qualities of Dharma is inconceivable, the qualities of the Sangha is inconceivable, and making offering to these 3 inconceivables has inconceivable merits. So I offer these tea and bread to the 3 inconceivables. Hindi, I don't know. You have to just check. They need to check. So His Holiness directing the people serving tea to spread in the room, not just focus in the center of the hall. No. 하면서 군주 잡로 하고 비기 힌디 파게 돼요. 비기 잡로는 하고. 자르민다고. 디엔도 자르민다. 그래. 정말 그래. This is mine. Amongst you, how many of you do understand Tibetan or know Tibetan? Please raise your hands. Anyone on stage?
I ask among the audience who understand Tibetan, some already. 자, 다음에는 대략들이
So those of you who have come to this teaching, are there anyone who has not been here before? Please raise your hands. Those who are here for the first time, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. Next, I usually start by saying, whenever I meet anyone or whenever I give some talk or lecture, I always say that first of all, I am a human being, one of the 7 billion human beings on this earth. So as human beings, we are social animals. So many animals are also social animals. So each individual is connected to the society, and that we are dependent on the society itself, our community. Whether you are rich or educated or so wherever you are, we all know that we are interconnected. And so the whole world is today economically interconnected. And therefore, we talk about global economy, which has to do with the whole world, and we are not concerned only for individuals. And then with regard to climate change, global warming, it also affects the whole world. It doesn't. The climate change and global warming does not make any discrimination between religious sects or peoples and races and so forth. So under these climatic conditions, we are all same. We suffer together. We also enjoy together. And therefore, it's very important for us to think about others, the whole humanity and others. So thinking about others, caring about others, or altruism is not only, has not only to do with religion, but if you take care of others, you automatically benefit. And therefore, many of the problems that we face in today's world are human creation. It's very clear. And this, since it's human creation, we need to overcome it. So I usually say that as Buddhists, we may pray to the Buddha, like may all sufferings be eliminated. But what we need to know is that we have to work to eliminate suffering. Because the Buddha himself has said, especially that you are your own master. And the Buddhas do not take away the suffering of sentient beings, nor do they eliminate us.
You understand English? All of you understand English? No. Hi. That Thai translation is better.
And so the Buddhas do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they take away the suffering of sentient beings.
Then you have to try to.
Nor do they transpose their own realizations, but only by showing the truth they help us.
I cannot speak Thai language. I only know yang. And the rhythm is also like that. Okay. So now we are
We are in the 21st century today. In the 20th century, many of the man-made problems, like wars, battles, all were creations of humans. And then in the beginning of this 21st century, we still faced these problems, human-made, even sometimes created in the name of religion. And so these problems which we have created must be solved by ourselves. So of course we do not voluntarily, with the wish to have suffering and problems, we didn't create them. So due to our thinking, our way of thinking and short-sightedness, although we do not want to create suffering, because we engage in the wrong method, we create problems. And so, taking yourself as an example, we need to think about helping others. We do not need to talk about future lives or about, as Buddhists, we do not need to talk about Buddhahood. We do not need to think about the Buddha or the Sangha or the next life or God or Allah. So just think about our own life. So if we create more problems, we are not happier. And therefore, when we see all these problems created by ourselves, humans, so sometimes even if the sufferings and problems do not are not related to us physically directly, but we'll still feel anxious. And so future life is something, of course, yet to come. And so due to our short-sightedness and narrow-mindedness, which is because of self-centered attitude, this extreme self-centered attitude, whereby we think only of ourselves. And then when you only think or focus on your own well-being, you also think, extend that to your own family, near and dear ones, and so forth. And then because of that, you discriminate others, distance others. And then there's creation of problems to others. And therefore, on the one hand, because of this extreme self-centered attitude, which thinks only of yourself and people on your side, we have lots of problems. Now, in order to avoid or do away with this short-sightedness, we need to have this holistic idea or outlook, seeing that things are dependently originated, that there's nothing independently or objectively existing. And so, the more you are altruistic, you can reduce the self-centered attitude. You can think that others also want happiness and do not want suffering. And so then you may be able to direct your mind to work for others more than yourself, however difficult it may be. And so to have this holistic attitude or outlook, for this, the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination is very relevant. So someone you call your enemy or adversary becomes so under many circumstances, many different factors. There's no one whom you may call your enemy or adversary who becomes so just because of one factor. So ordinarily we may talk about friends and enemies. What happens here is that we become attached to those whom we consider as our friends or near and dear ones, seeing them as friends, objectively existing friends. And then we become attached. And on the other hand, we consider others as objectively or independently existing as enemies, and then we have aversion towards them. But if we are able to see that friends and enemies are relative, they come about because of conditions, then you will not have that kind of strong grasping at any so-called enemies or friends. For example, if you have someone you really love so much, and then you hear that from someone that, oh, your friend so-and-so has killed somebody, you may not really believe it, because you have this kind of attachment towards that person as being someone who's totally good. Whereas on the other hand, if you hear about your enemy doing something good to another person, that also is something unbelievable, because of the attachment focusing on some kind of a solid target or object to which you become attached or you feel aversion. So therefore, because of that solidity that you perceive in the friends or enemies, then you have attachment and aversion. So I have a friend, American scientist, an old scientist named Aaron Beck. He is a psychiatrist. And so from his own experience for many years, he said that when we become angry at somebody, that person looks totally negative, whereas in reality, the negativeness in the person that we see is 90% of is our own mental projection. So he's a scientist who has studied about people's emotions and psychology and helped people with psychiatric problems. So it's very clear that our problems are created by our attachment and aversion. And there's that also too because of our a perception of a solidity in the objects. And so all sentient beings do not want suffering and want happiness, and we all have the same right to achieve these goals. And so we need to think about the 7 billion people on this earth. So each and every one of us has the responsibility, because we live in this society of humans. And therefore, if we could think of helping the whole humanity and to have more sense of morality, in order to be able to make all sentient beings have this kind of attitude, of course, religion alone cannot help. 6 billion of these 7 billion people are said to be religious, or even amongst them, there are people who are full of aversion and attachment. So those who profess to be religious, they indulge in these negative actions and so forth because of not having a strong conviction about morality, the practice of morality and the cultivation of principles. And so, because we are not really sincere with our own religion that we profess to be following, and we are not able to practice according to those religions. And so in order to help those without religion, those non-believers as well as believers, equally we need to promote secular ethics. In the West, this secular ethics, secularism, has this connotation of sometimes they take secularism and atheism to be synonymous. Of course, atheism is opposing God or religion, whereas secularism doesn't have that kind of connotation. So in India, for over 3,000 years, there has been the practice of secular ethics or secularism. And even Indian constitution is based on secularism. So secularism in India means respecting all religions, and not only respecting people who are believers, but even non-believers. But secularism means respecting all 7 billion people. So this is important, isn't it? So whether you're a believer or non-believer, if we could think of helping all and think that if all could be happy and also practice and engage in the practices of secular ethics, it would be beneficial to all. So as a human being, I promote this secular ethics which covers all 7 billion people on this earth. Secondly, as a Buddhist monk, a bhikshu, and a religious practitioner, as I said before, we have the practice of the 3 trainings. Even in the non-Buddhist traditions, they have these 3 practices: the morality, concentration, and wisdom. And then with regard to the religious traditions or spiritual traditions, the religious faith, which may have evolved in India first, and then of course in Egypt also there evolved some religious tradition, and also in China. And so with regard to India, the first religious tradition may be Sankhya, and then there are the Vedantas and Mimamsas and Vaisheshikas, and then 2,600 years ago Mahavira came, and then the Jainism started, and then around 30 years later, perhaps, after Mahavira, maybe 30 or 40 years later, then the Buddha Shakyamuni came. And then in Arabian region, in Middle East, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam came into being. Being, perhaps Taoism came before Buddhism. In other words, all these major religious traditions teach the message of love and compassion. And then the theistic religions talk about, when they explain or describe their God, the God is said to be infinite love, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism and so forth. And also in Buddhism, love and compassion is emphasized, as we have this praise to the Buddha, homage to the Buddha, where it says, out of your compassion you taught the holy Dharma to resolve all distorted views. And so all the different religious traditions are based on love and compassion. Even when we were born, we were able to survive because of love. We were born from our mothers. And so, under mother's care and love to us, we have survived. And so, since our birth, for a few years, after our birth, for a few years at least, our mother and our parents and other relatives have taken care of us, showed us love. And so, because of that, the love is absorbed in our blood too. And therefore, so if someone is full of love and compassion, and you are surrounded by people full of love and compassion, then even the body elements are in balance. And so your blood pressure will be less. And so if you are within an environment of love, then there is less fear and anxiety. However good the external facilities you may have, but if you do not have that love, if you lack love, compassion, then there is anxiety and fear. And so, in order to get rid of this, and if you are surrounded by people full of love and compassion, then you won't have fear and anxiety. And so, this is the basis of friendship as well, because friendship is based on trust, and trust is for that we need love and compassion. If you have sense of competition, then there's or jealousy and so forth, then you won't have love and compassion. And therefore, love and compassion is very important. So I always think that along these lines, and also tell others as well. All these religious traditions, the main message of all these religious traditions is love and compassion. And so, even with regard to our faith, the love and compassion, in order to promote this love and compassion, we have the faith traditions. So the more your faith in your God, for example, in the theistic traditions, the more you will pay attention to the practice of love and compassion. So according to the theistic religions, they say that everything is created by God. And the God is seen as infinite love. And therefore, when the God is infinite love, and we are His creation, we have a spark of love of God. So, for example, we talk about gene. And so children have the genes of their parents and so forth. And so similarly, as God is seen as someone full of love and compassion, and therefore we have also some seed of love and compassion as well. They would be aware of that. And the more they are devoted to their God, the more they will emphasize practice of love and compassion, because God is love. And so your faith helps in promoting or advancing your practice of love as well. And so we see amongst the Christian practitioners lots of people who serve the poor community. And so this is in service of God, they see as well. So this is about the theistic religions. And so we can make two divisions amongst the religions. So theistic and non-theistic. Within the theistic, there are those who also believe in past and future lives. And then there are those who also say that after this life, either you go to heaven or hell, and not taking birth again and again. And then, with regard to non-theistic religions, there is one part of Sankhya school of thought who say that everything evolves from a primal factor, or pradhan as it's called in Sanskrit. And so everything comes from that pradhan. And so there's no created God as such, but everything comes from that pradhan. And then within the theistic religion, this Sankhya school, there's also one which is theistic in their assertion. So what I'm here talking about is the non-theistic Sankhya school. And then also within the non-theistic schools, there are Buddhism and Jainism. So amongst these three, we have two divisions, those accepting Atma or soul, and those who do not. And so only Buddhism asserts that there is no independent soul as such. The rest of the religious traditions all believe in a soul. In the Indian non-Buddhist traditions, they use the term Atman. And so the theory of Anatman or soulless theory is asserted only in Buddhism. And so, philosophically, we see these differences among the religious traditions. But the goal of all these traditions with the different philosophical views is to promote love. If you really are sincere and serious about your own religious tradition, you follow your religious tradition, then naturally you will be a compassionate and loving person. So in reality also, these different philosophical views are meant for promoting, for producing loving and compassionate people. So even before the Buddha came into this world, there had been many different religious traditions, and even today we have all the different religious traditions. So it's not possible to have only one religion in the world, and that is not also practical as well. Because within Buddhism itself, we have the 3 vehicles and also the 4 philosophical schools of thought. And so, even amongst the followers of the Buddha, the same teacher we have, in accordance with the different mental dispositions, the inclinations and so forth of the followers, we have different philosophical views. So the Buddha has not imposed his final view on everyone who followed him. So what this shows is that amongst the 6 billion believers in this world, we have different mental dispositions. And so, accordingly, we need different methods to promote love and compassion. So if you have 100 patients, you can't give only one medicine to all of them, the same medicine to all of them. We need to give whichever medicine is suitable and appropriate to the different patients according to their sickness and disease. And so, similarly, just as we have to see which kind of sickness and disease the different patients have, and also in accordance with the physiological build-up of the different patients, we need to give medicines accordingly. And similarly, the spiritual traditions are medicine for our psychological problems, mental problems. And so, accordingly, we need different medicines for these different psychological problems that we have. So mainly the message of these traditions is to be moral and to be kind and loving and so forth. So it is possible for us to achieve religious harmony. So in our history, we have accounts of fighting, battles and so forth. In the name of religion, even today, this is happening. In Burma, for example, Myanmar, some Buddhists terrorize or cause problems to Muslims, and also in Sri Lanka, this is happening today. And so, just because of different religious traditions, fighting amongst each other is not, it's very unfortunate. So it may be understandable if non-believers fight amongst themselves. But with religious belief, which teach love and compassion, which you are aware of, while despite this, if you create more problems, fighting and so forth, then it's quite unfortunate and sad. So as a Buddhist bhikshu, I always emphasize and work hard to bring religious harmony. So those of you who are here, firstly, we are all same human beings. And therefore, think about secular ethics, and to think about the happiness of all humanity. And then, secondly, as Buddhists, please be friendly with people of other religious traditions, understanding that because of our mental dispositions, different mental dispositions, other people follow other religious traditions, when we follow our own tradition, and then respect others. And so, Buddhism teaches selflessness. This is something unique to Buddhism. It's not there in other religious traditions. So, as I briefly said earlier, quoted this verse, the sages or the Buddhas do not wash away the sins of sentient beings, nor do they take away the suffering of sentient beings, nor do they transpose their own realizations, but only by showing the truth. And they lead us to liberation or nirvana. And so, our sins cannot be washed away by the Buddhas, nor can they take away our suffering, which has come from these sins that we have created. And then, in order to overcome or eliminate our suffering and the causes, the Buddhas cannot share or cannot pass their own realization to us as if giving a gift. So all religious traditions, which are non-theistic religious traditions, teach law of causality. If you do something good, you have a positive effect, and if you do something negative, you have accordingly negative consequences. And therefore, if you create a karma or action which causes happiness in others, the biggest happiness is something that we want. It is desirable to us. And therefore, the karma to create happiness is considered positive. And then suffering, the karma that creates suffering, is something which we consider as undesired. And the biggest suffering is undesired, therefore the karma that creates it is considered to be negative. And so, whether karma is positive or negative is related to the effect that they bring, whether they are positive or negative effects. So we do not talk about creator, God as such, as Buddhists. And therefore, if you create positive actions, the karmas that you have as the positive consequences, and similarly it is the case with negative karma. And then there are, of course, neutral karmas as well. And therefore, in order to eliminate or overcome suffering, we need to reduce or overcome the negative karmas and create more of the positive karmas. And in this way, the Buddha is able to show us the path to liberation by showing the truth of causality. So with regards to this teaching the truth of suchness, there are two levels. On the one hand, there's the law of causality, and then this when you go deeper, we have the ultimate reality of the two realities or two truths. We have the ultimate truth. And then there are and then we have those who assert also the selflessness of phenomena. So Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas assert selflessness of persons mainly, and then the Chittamatra and Madhyamakas assert also not only selflessness of persons but also selflessness of phenomena. So how do you consider one school, a certain school, to be more profound than others? We need to use lots of reasonings. So even with regard to the teaching, the words of the Buddha himself, we do not resort only to scriptural authority, but use logic and reasoning. And so the Madhyamakas and Chittamatras use lots of reasoning. So they consider reasoning more important than just resorting to scriptural authority. And because of that, Dignaga, who was a student of Vasubandhu, and then also Dignaga's follower Dharmakirti, have written texts on Buddhist logic and epistemology. And especially in the Sanskrit tradition, since there's so much emphasis on the importance of using logic and reasoning, therefore these texts written by Master Nagarjuna to establish selflessness of persons and phenomena, they use reasoning. And therefore Dignaga and Dharmakirti have also written texts on logic and epistemology. And so the Buddha is said to show us the truth or reality and lead us, show us the path to liberation. So with regard to that reality, there is one which is a provisional one, and then the ultimate reality or truth as well. And so, first hearing these teachings, and then reflecting on the meaning, and then meditating on that, we create or develop the path within ourselves. And so by hearing teachings first from others, we develop this understanding based on that. And then what you have heard, you need to use reason to reflect on it over and over again. As Tsongkhapa says, by using the fourfold reasoning to establish the meaning of what I've heard day and night, and so that you may be able to draw a conclusion saying if something is this, it has to be that, it has to lead to that, and so forth. And then you also can say that if you assert certain views, then it also actually contradicts our own experience and logic. And therefore, we have the logic or reasoning or principle of relativity or relatedness and relation, and also the functionality. And these are also based on, so logical arguments are based on the principle of functionality and relations, and these in turn are based on the nature. So the fact that certain causes and conditions are related to certain effects are nature. So in this way we have to use reasoning and reflect on whatever we have heard. And so just remaining on the level of understanding based on hearing or study itself is not so stable, because you may believe or you may say, oh, this is this, but then today you may believe in somebody's reasoning, but then tomorrow somebody else may have another reason to disprove that, and then you will follow that person. So without doing analysis yourself, you will not have this kind of firm conviction. And so through one's analytical, critical analysis, then you come to some conclusion, and then if you use that in your practice, and you actually develop some experience, then you will have a strong conviction in it. And even if somebody might come to you and say otherwise, you will not be wavered or from that belief or conviction. And so whatever conviction you have found regarding something, some point, then you need to actually apply that over and over again to become your own experience. For example, even athletes need to train themselves over and over again for weeks, months, and years, and so forth. And once they are well trained, then they actually become more and more acquainted to the different exercises they do to build up their body. And then they become adept at whatever they need to do. And so similarly, it is the case with our mind. So in order to have experience based on meditation, you need to have the conviction or some experience based on your reflection. And for that, in turn, you need to base yourself on the understanding drawn from listening to teachings. And therefore, the Buddha has said, just O bhikshus and scholars, just as the gold is tested by rubbing, cutting, and burning, likewise you should analyze or examine my teaching and then believe it, not because you have devotion to me. And therefore, with regards to the teaching of the Buddha, Master Nagarjuna and others have actually used logic to establish whether the Buddha's teachings are definitive or provisional. And then, therefore, those teachings which cannot be taken literally or are said to be provisional. And when these teachings are tested or examined through logic and reasoning, and if they go against reasoning, then they are said to be provisional. You cannot take them to be definitive. For example, in the case of Chittamatras, they say that Sandhi Nimochana Sutra is a definitive teaching of the Buddha, whereas the Madhyamakas, from the point of view of Madhyamakas, they say that even these sutras like this are also provisional. And therefore, in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, he says that Langa Avatara Sutra and so forth are said to be provisional teachings because of using reasoning. And so, although certain philosophical traditions or schools may say that certain teachings or sutras are definitive, but then if these teachings also go against reasoning, you cannot actually assert them as being definitive, but provisional. So, the Master Nagarjuna and others in the Sanskrit tradition, and particularly the Madhyamaka tradition, use reasoning to establish these sutras or the teachings of the Buddha, whether they are definitive or provisional. So, for example, the different measurements that are given, that are established by science through their investigation, experiment, and so forth, these are something empirical to us. And so we must accept what is empirical. And because Jetangkapa has said that if you accept things which are against reason and logic, then you cannot be an authoritative person and a reliable one. And therefore, Master Nagarjuna, Master Vasubandhu, in his Abhidhamma Kosha, may have mentioned the certain cosmology in Buddhist cosmology in it. For example, the distance of the moon and sun from the earth, and also the size of the sun and the moon, and so forth, cannot be taken literally because they are against our experience. So we should not be too surprised to reject. When we hear someone rejecting these teachings that I've mentioned from Abhidhammakosha, so it is very, the emphasis is given on using logic and reasoning and doing analysis into the teaching of the Buddha. So
one aspect of Buddhist ceremony was philosopher, thinker. One aspect of Buddhist ceremony was scientist. So he never sort of accept sort of blind faith. He emphasizes investigation, experiment, test. 자, 드디어 이르 전에
So, Buddha Dharma is about using our logic and then reflecting on the teachings and going about with our practice through in this way. And therefore, in the Vinaya Sutra, there are praises like just as the sun blooms, opens the lotus, likewise the words of the Buddha illuminate our mind, the world. And so the teaching of the Buddha lead us to enlightenment. And so the words of the Buddha has the ability to open our wisdom. So I'm not saying that because the Buddha's teaching is quite amazing that it is the best teaching. I'm not saying that. So I always say that whichever religion is most effective to you, to that individual, that religion is the best. We cannot say one medicine is the best of all, but in relation to a certain sickness or disease, we may say, oh, this medicine is best for this sickness or disease. And so we cannot just pick up one religion and say that this is the best one. So for the Christians, Christianity is the best. For Muslims, Islam is the best religion. So, for example, for a non-Buddhist tradition practitioner, the idea or the concept of Atman is best. Anatman theory will not work for him or her. So, in some texts, it is said that someone who is not spiritually matured cannot benefit from the teaching of selflessness. Because for such a person, maybe teaching on self, that saying that there is an Atman or soul is suitable, more appropriate. The Buddha himself has said that there is a being or a person who is the carrier of the load, and the five aggregates are the load. And so, to some disciples of the Buddha, he has taught such. And so he has taught these in accordance with the mental disposition of that disciple. So, for example, if you have a food which is very hard, a person without teeth or good teeth cannot actually chew it well. So someone who has good teeth, very strong teeth, may be able to take such a hard food, but not the other one who has no teeth. You cannot force that person to eat what you like. And so, whichever is most effective, that religious tradition is much the best for that particular person. And so, having studied the different Buddhist philosophical traditions and their philosophical thoughts in the Nalanda tradition, I can see that the difference in except the difference in the mental dispositions of different religious traditions, followers of these. So I have studied these different philosophical schools that are also given or explained in Tarka Jvala or Blades of Reasoning by Bhavivek and so forth. So I've studied these philosophical schools which have this view of some kind of an absolute being as creator and so forth. But for those who have the mental disposition to actually follow such tradition, these kind of ideas are best for them. So as the Southeast Asian countries traditionally are Buddhist countries, and for example, China also today is a communist country, but then traditionally China is a Buddhist country. So today we have 400 to 500 million Buddhists in China. In the Southeast Asian countries, people from Southeast Asian regions, traditionally we are Buddhists. West is traditionally Judeo-Christian area. And then the Arab regions traditionally are followers of Islam, and also Judaism and Israelis and so forth follow Judaism. So there are maybe over less than 100,000 followers of the Zoroastrianism, the Parsis living in Mumbai. But they are able to live in India very peacefully, without any fear, and they are able to follow their own religious tradition. So for those who follow their own, in the West, like Judeo-Christian religious traditions and so forth, these are more appropriate and suitable for the Westerners. But for us, we are traditionally Buddhists, and Buddhism is our own treasure, our own cherished heritage. And since the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha lived, he gave so many teachings, and later on they were compiled in Pali. And so today we have these countries, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, and so forth, as followers of the Pali tradition. And they have very good Vinaya, monastic code of discipline practice. And then we, as follower of the Tibetans following the Mula Sarvastivada tradition, also have the same Vinaya tradition, except that maybe there's the number of vows. So there are minor differences. So Vinaya we have the same, and then the Sutra also is common. Whereas when it comes to Abhidharma, there is upper or lower or Abhidharma. So in the upper Abhidharma tradition, we have the so both actually emphasize the teaching of selflessness, anatman theory. And then in the Sanskrit tradition, we also come across the dual selflessness of persons and phenomena. So there is some difference in the Abhidharma, but basically we have the same common teaching. And then the teaching on the Four Noble Truths is something the Buddha taught in public. But when it comes to the perfection of wisdom teachings, they are not taught publicly. And so, as we read in the Heart Sutra, for example, there are the Asuras, Gandharvas, and so forth mentioned, and even gods and so forth mentioned. So there are amongst the audience of the Buddha not only humans but non-humans. And then the Heart Sutra is a dialogue between Avalokiteshvara and Shariputra. And so we have amongst the audience humans as well as non-humans. And it was not taught publicly, and therefore the Mahayana teachings like these are said. There are people who say they are not teaching of the Buddha. In the past there had been people like that, and even today we have. And so Master Maitreya and also Master Nagarjuna and also Bhaviveka has actually argued for Mahayana being the teaching of the Buddha himself. And then in Shantideva's text also, he argues for Mahayana being the teaching of the Buddha. And even today we have people who say that Mahayana is not teaching of the Buddha. And particularly there are people who say the Mahayana Tantra is not the teaching of the Buddha. And so the Sanskrit teachings in the Sanskrit tradition, it's quite clear that they were not taught publicly. So most of these teachings were not taught publicly. And so, and then in when it comes to Tantra, they were not especially taught in public. They may have been taught by to individuals when they are able to have access to pure visions. And so we have the teaching within the traditions of our tradition. We have the extensive lineage, the profound lineage, and then extensive practice lineage, and then the profound view lineage. Sorry. And then there is the lineage of the the profound lineage of blessings. And so when it comes to Tantra, there are differences also. For example, Kala Chakra is slightly different from other Tantric teachings. So perhaps the lineage of the practice lineage of the blessing lineage may have to do with Tantric practice. So it's not something separate from the other two traditions. We cannot say that this that the extensive practice lineage and the profound view lineage are not related to the blessing lineage at all. So without the understanding of bodhicitta, without bodhicitta and understanding of emptiness, you cannot have the practice or the blessing lineage. So to me, we may have to consider these different traditions called the blessing lineage and the extensive practice lineage and the profound lineage. And so all these traditions have the Vinaya, the monastic discipline or the moral discipline as the basis, the foundation, and then develop the path of concentration and wisdom and so forth. And on top of that, then we have the Tantric practice where we do Daidhi Yoga practice. These are added. And so in China, Buddhism spread with the help of such masters as Tangsan, Xuanzang. So Tangsan Lama or Xuanzang may have followed the Silk route, and then there is also another route that the other masters may have taken. So there is a story that Tangsen Lama or Shenzang actually was able to meet Nagabodhi. So he studied in Nalanda monastic institution, and then he spread during the Tang dynasty Buddhism to China. Before Buddhism came to Tibet, China already had Buddhism. And so we have lots of teachings that are translated into Chinese, such as Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and also Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Karika, Madhyamaka Avatara, sorry. And also its auto-commentary by Chandrakirti himself. And not Chandrakirti's clear word. So I don't know if Tangsen actually met Nagabodhi, because Nagabodhi was a Madhyamaka philosopher. So Dharamsala, who was also a master from Nalanda, he actually commented on the 400 verses in accordance with, interpreted into Chittamatra view. And so Tangsen Lama or Shenzang actually seems to have met some Chittamatra master, and therefore he spread the Chittamatra tradition or philosophical tradition in China. And then from China it spread to Vietnam, Korea and Japan. And so all these countries also follow the Perfectional Wisdom Sutra. And then we have the Sanskrit tradition spreading into Tibet, and from there to Mongolia and other areas. So we have the almost like maybe the complete treatises of the different traditions of philosophical traditions of India in Tibet. So, for example, with regard to epistemological texts, Dignaga's one text of Dignaga was translated into Chinese, but not others, like Dharmakirti's the 7 treatises, and then also there's Pramana Samuchaya of Dignaga and so forth, are not translated in Chinese. Whereas in Tibetan, we have translations of these texts, all these epistemological texts. And then in the 13th century, Sakya Pandita wrote his own treatise called The Treasury of Logic or Epistemology. And then Chabachuja Sengye also spread this study of logic and epistemology and debate. So there may be over around 1,000 different languages in the world, but using certain logical languages or language saying if something were A, it doesn't need to be necessarily to be B and so forth. Using this kind of absurdum logic, maybe only in Tibetan language. And then we also have the different philosophical thoughts of the different philosophical schools, like Vaibhashik, Sotantik, and so forth, in our language. And so, based on the Indian texts, we have the Tibetan masters have actually made distinction amongst the different philosophical traditions, like Vaibhashik, Sotantik. And so, Upalosel may be one of the earliest ones writing the philosophical texts called the different philosophical systems or tenet systems called Trubta. And then later on there have been many other texts on Trubta. So those texts which are not there in your language, in Chinese, perhaps you may be able to, you should translate into your language, and so that you have broader understanding and insight into the teaching of the Buddha. So please keep that in mind. And so this is about the teachings, the religious traditions of the world, and also the teaching of the Buddha spread in the world. And in Tibet, since the 7th century, when King Songtsen Gampo of Tibet married the princesses of Nepal and China, perhaps there may have been some influence of Buddhism on the Tibetan king and the Tibetans, because they brought different statues of Buddha Shakyamuni to Tibet. And then from the 8th century, Master Chandarakshita came to Tibet and at the invitation of the Tibetan king, Trisong Detsen, and with his help, the Samye monastery was built, and then he also took the responsibility of teaching Buddha Dharma and also translating Buddha Dharma into Tibetan. So he was a great scholar who wrote. I mean, you can see his greatness of scholarship if you read his books like Madhyamaka Alamkara and also Tatuv Samgraha Panjika, the difficult points of Tatuv Samgraha itself, which is a text on logic and epistemology. And then his own student, Kamalashila, came to Tibet as well. And he was also a great scholar, which can be known from his own writings, like the Lamp of Madhyamaka, and also his Tatuv Samgraha Panjika, which is a commentary to his own teacher, Chandarakshita's Tatuv Samgraha. And so Chandarakshita established this tradition of study of the teaching of the Buddha in Tibet. And then Kamalashila also was invited to Tibet around the 9th century. And so, therefore, I always say that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is in the lineage of Nalanda tradition. So when initially in the 8th century there were lots of obstacles to establish Buddhism on the Tibetan soil, the master Padmasambhava helped in overcoming them. And therefore these three personalities in the Tibetan history, who are known as Ken Lop Chö Sum, the trio of Khenpo, meaning abbot, or the Chandarakshita, and then Lopen means the master, which is a reference to Guru Padmasambhava, who gave tantric teachings to very few select disciples, such as the king and ministers and so forth. So we'll have a 15-minute break here. So if you need to go to the loo, please do so. So when you listen to this discourse, you may consider attending a class with me. And so in the morning session, I will give some explanation, and then in the afternoon, you should have review sessions in Chinese. So we have prepared people to lead the review sessions for Chinese-speaking people and also English-speaking people. We'll have the review session at 1:30. Just for your information, I've been asked to give this information, and so 1:30. If you are busy, then of course you have every right to go wherever you need to go. And so you should have you should use the review session for question and answer. And so please do it like that. And so with regard to Buddhism, we have the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition. If we make these two divisions, the common teaching to all of the followers of the Buddha is the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. So impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. So what this shows is that whatever comes through causes disintegrates. Therefore, they are impermanent. So maybe this is with reference to mainly the coarser level of impermanence, and then it is said that whatever has come through causes is impermanent, and whatever has come through contaminated causes is in the nature of suffering. All contaminated things are in suffering, and within suffering there is the suffering of suffering, or painful experiences that we know as painful, and then changeable suffering and pervasive existential conditioned suffering. And then with regard to emptiness here, it refers to the absence of permanent single self, which is asserted by the non-Buddhist traditions. And then also we can understand it in terms of the absence of a person substantially existent autonomous person or being. So Sautrantikas, particularly maybe the Sautrantikas following reason, and also Chittamatras and Madhyamakas, when they explain about impermanence, they do so in terms of the subtle impermanence. Whereas in the Vaibhashika system, they talk about is something arising from causes. There's arisal, and then there's abidance, and then also disintegration. So others say that whatever has come through causes and conditions, they are bound to disintegrate. And that disintegration of the thing does not need a third factor to cause that, but the moment something comes into existence, they also are subject to disintegration because of that cause. And therefore, since things are brought about through causes and conditions, and they are subject to their cause, the psychophysical aggregates we have, which are the results of karma, and mainly karma, and at the root is ignorance. And therefore, a person is devoid of is absent of permanent, autonomous and single self or Atma. So according to the Madhyamaka tradition of Nagarjuna, Master Nagarjuna, impermanence and suffering and so forth can be understood in terms of the grosser and the subtler levels. And so with regard to cause, so things come through causes and not without causes. And these causes do not come about through, or with regard to the cause, it's not something like the movement of the mind of a creator, like Ishvara and so forth. And so there is the cause. So with regard to the suffering, for example, the noble truth of suffering, it is said to be to have come through causes. And then suffering also comes on the basis of a condition. And so in Asanga's Abhidhamma Samuccaya, it mentions 3 conditions: unwavering condition, and potential condition, and impermanent condition. So there may be different interpretations in different texts. So with regards to the origin of suffering, it has these 4 characteristics of cause, condition, and so forth. Cause of all and so forth. And then with regard to the cessation, it has the 4 attributes of being of cessation, which means stopping the cause of suffering through the application of antidotes. And so once you apply the antidote, the causes of the suffering is completely removed, and it's not like the condition, the suffering will not arise because the conditions are not right there, but it's because the antidote has actually uprooted it. And therefore, the cessation is also called peaceful. And then because once you apply the antidote to the cause of suffering, therefore, once the fundamental cause, ignorance, is removed, then you will not have suffering anymore after that. And therefore, the cessation is also called excellent, and also the renunciation or definitive emergence. And then with regard to the path, it is called the path, which is and also awareness. Awareness in terms of with reference to understanding or gaining insight into the truth of suchness. And so cessation is brought about through the practice or the application of the path, and therefore the path is also called the application. And then it is also called the factor that leads to definite emergence. So when you actually elaborate on the path, then we have the 37 factors of enlightenment, such as the 4 establishment of mindfulnesses, mindfulness of body, mind, sensation or feelings, and mental phenomena. So on the basis of these four mindfulnesses, you have the cultivation of the renunciation, and then also cultivating the insight into selflessness, and also insight into the emptiness and so forth. And so since suffering comes through the destructive emotions, which are in turn rooted in our ignorance, therefore we need to eradicate this ignorance. And therefore once you understand this causal connection between our suffering and ignorance, then we would have the wish to overcome the suffering and its causes. So when you see the possibility of overcoming suffering by eliminating the cause of suffering, the ignorance, through the application of the antidote, then you will have this earnest wish or the aspiration to apply the teaching within oneself to reach the nirvana. So many of us just take it for granted what we hear about the teachings, but we do not really do much investigation into the teaching, and therefore we are not able to gain a true conviction in the teaching of the Buddha. And so therefore it's difficult to develop what are known as the four perfect abandonments or exertions. So once you develop some sense of the conviction of the teaching of the Buddha, then you will have this conviction into the four exertions, and then you will put effort in developing the path. And the experience, as you develop more and more experience, it becomes more and more clear. So this clarity is gained through your investigation and analysis, and your ability to do critical analysis, critical examination becomes clearer and so forth, and clearer. And therefore, you also develop what are known as the wisdom or the intelligence, which are like extensive, clear, profound, and swift. And so, when you gain more and more clarity and more powerful insight, then you develop the rest of the 37 practices. Such as the 5 forces and 5 faculties. And so, such as the 5 faculties, such as the faith, faculty of faith, and so forth, and then also the 5 forces, and also the 8-fold path, a noble path, and then the 7-fold path to liberation. And in this way, then you develop the path progressively, as referred by the Heart Sutra mantra, which says the Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi Swaha. So once you develop this, the true renunciation or the first path within your own particular path that you are following, then you have the path of accumulation, And when you develop this understanding or the vipassana into the selflessness within your path, then you have entered into the through meditation, and then you have developed the path of preparation or application. And then once you develop the insight into emptiness or selflessness directly, you have entered into the path of seeing, and then you still push yourself further in that insight or the realization of selflessness or emptiness directly. You are you acquaint yourself with this path further. Then you are in the path of meditation, and then finally you attain enlightenment. So, Gati refers to the path of accumulation. This first Gati, second Gati refers to the path of preparation. The Paragati refers to the path of seeing, and then Samgati refers to the path of meditation. And Bodhi means enlightenment. And so the Tibetan term for Bodhi is Changchup. Chang meaning purifying all negativities, all destructive emotions and their stains, and then also chup meaning to be full of knowledge of everything. And so you gain that state of Changchup or enlightenment. So we have to see whether this is possible. This is a possibility for in general, and particularly whether it is possible for oneself, one individual, to attain that goal. So once you actually see that the possibility and that there is the possibility to attain that goal of enlightenment for yourself, then you will have the aspiration to tread on the path. And without actually understanding what enlightenment or Changchup is, just merely believing that there is something called enlightenment or Buddhahood and so forth, you will not have that determination to reach that through understanding and logic. And we do not want suffering, but we want happiness. And therefore, these are related to causality, and the causes of suffering has to be checked whether they are in the intrinsic nature of the mind or not. And so you'll see that the basic intrinsic nature of mind is clarity, clear light. And so you will find in what is taught in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, what it teaches is that this subjective mind that we have is temporarily covered by or contaminated by the different defilements. Whereas in its intrinsic nature, innate nature, it is that these defilements are not in the nature of the mind. And therefore, in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, this is the main teaching, that clear light of the mind. And in the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, what is emphasized is emptiness. And so, when you attain enlightenment, what you overcome is the stains that are in our mind, these defilements. And so, when the defilements are removed completely, then you have a cessation within yourself. And for that, fundamentally, what you have to understand also is that the mind's nature is empty of independent existence. And therefore, on the basis of this understanding of the empty nature of the mind, you also will be able to see that because the mind's nature is clarity as well, that clear light, therefore the negative emotions and so forth can be overcome completely. Whereas in the teachings of the Sandhi-Nimochana Sutra, although it is said that the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma teachings, the Panchaparamita Sutras, are said to be provisional provisional or interpretable. This is only for the purpose of those who are not able to take this teaching of the Prajnaparamita Sutras literally. And so, in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, and based on which the Master Maitreya wrote the Mahayana's Anuttara Tantra, he goes through the nature of the mind with the 9 analogies. And so the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma seems to emphasize on the empty nature of the mind, empty side aspect. And then the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma seems to be emphasizing on the path to enlightenment. And therefore, when you go into the subtle degrees of subtlety of the mind itself, we have the teachings of the Tantras. And so in which we find mention of the gross and subtle degrees of mind. And therefore, we can see the progression along the path, or these teachings of Sutra and Tantra is like a progression along the class of the school, classes in schools. So without the foundation of the lower classes, we cannot jump to the higher classes. So likewise, without the foundation of the basic teachings in the Sutrayana, then you cannot enter into the tantric practice as such. Although in Tibetan society we find people who seem to be talking high-sounding practices, but without really understanding and having the experience of the teachings which taught in the Sutrayana, it's not possible to have the practices or the experiences taught in Tantra. And so Master Gongtang Tenpe Döme has said that we should not actually spoil the teachings, like spoiling and called wasting the sandalwood by burning it and turning it into coals. But if we look in our society, we see that people actually do some practices in order to have longevity, to long life, and also to overcome sicknesses and so forth. But teaching of the Buddha is not meant for these trivial kind of achievements. And so we cannot just pray to have the understanding and the insight into the teaching of the Buddha. So I always say that we have to become 21st century Buddhists. Although the teaching itself is not a blind teaching for a blind faith, but the way we actually carry out the teachings in our life, we make it as if it's for blind faith. So in the Chinese tradition, you always have this tradition of saying Amitabha, Amitabha. So blind faith is not sufficient. We must engage in the study of the Dharma. So since we came into exile, it's been over 55 years in India and in exile. So since many years, I was encouraging people or suggesting people to study the classic philosophical texts. And today we have even nuns who are now on the verge of becoming geshe-mas, female geshes. So if you could pay more attention to the study of the Dharma, then you have also the study of logic and psychology in the teaching of the Buddha. So you can even use it for those people who are non-believers. So this connects with the secular ethics that I was mentioning earlier. And then in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, we have the 6 perfections. Or if we add the 4 more perfections, there are 10 of them, such as the perfection of skillful means and so forth. So in which we study, we learn about the paths and the grounds. And then at the resultant state of Buddhahood, the Buddha's powers and the 4 fearlessnesses and so forth are also studied. And so this is a broad structure of Buddhism. So we have the 3 turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, beginning with the teaching on the 4 Noble Truths, which is the framework for the teaching of the Buddha. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the extensive practice lineage, which actually practice the path, progression along the path as taught in the Panchaparamita Sutra, and even in the Heart Sutra, which is very short text, but it shows the paths, such as the path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and so forth, briefly. So it's even in Heart Sutra we come across the 5 aggregates, the sources of consciousness, and the 5 elements and so forth, and also the paths, and then the resultant state of the Buddha, such as the powers of the Buddha and so forth. And then what is taught explicitly in these Perfection of Wisdom teachings is emptiness. And the path system is taught implicitly. So based on the understanding of emptiness, what kind of path you develop within yourself and how you go progress along the path is taught in the Panchaparamita Sutras. So the Panchaparamita Sutras' implicit content is brought out explicitly in the extensive lineage of practice and profound lineage of the path is taught explicitly in the Panchaparamita Sutras, emptiness. And then we have the practice of within the path, practice of the path, we have the equaling and exchanging self and others, which is mainly based on logic and reasoning. So Master Nagarjuna also teaches it in his text, and also so in this what is taught is that we are developing the idea that of equality of all sentient beings, and then developing bodhicitta, and then this great lineage of practice of blessing. And so for this practice of bodhicitta, we have the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, and the Shiksha Samuchaya by Master Shantideva. Sorry. So he wrote it in Nalanda monastic institution, and for some reason he was also said to have left that institution. And so towards the end of this text he mentions and in the beginning of the text it is also mentioned that you should also study the Shiksha Samuchaya. And so when it was inquired where this text was, it is said historically that the Shantideva has said that it is in his room, on the beam in his room. And so it's very clear that these 2 texts, the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara and the Shiksha Samuchaya, were written by the same master. Because these 2 texts, if you go through them, you'll see that what is not covered extensively in one text is covered extensively in the other, and vice versa. And then, since in Shiksha Samuchaya, Master Shantideva actually draws quotations from many sutras, it's really helpful to understand the sutra sources for our practice. So, since I have been able to, revive the lineage or the transmission of these two texts, which had declined for some time. So we have gone through the 8th chapter before, but I was told that we didn't have explanation of this 7th chapter. So we'll go through. They requested me to go through the 7th chapter, which is on page 77. Is it 76? So chapter 7, Lao. Having patience, I should develop enthusiasm. For awakening will dwell only in those who exert themselves, just as there is no movement without wind, so merit does not occur without enthusiasm. So this is asking, why did I not explain this 7th chapter? What happened actually? So this text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, teaches the practices of Bodhisattvas. And so, with regard to the practice of Bodhisattvas, so the preliminary practices, and then the actual path, and then the resultant effect. So the whole of this text can be summarized into these 3. So first we have the benefits of bodhicitta, and then the confession as and then embracing bodhicitta, and then next comes the practice of patience, the conscientiousness and alertness or vigilance or introspection, which are to purify one's practice of morality. So from chapter 4 onwards covers the 6 perfections. So this chapter 6 is patience, so within which there is a patience of accepting suffering willingly, and then also a patience or forbearance of the teaching on suchness. So what we need to have is not just understanding of the teaching but we need to feel some have some taste of the teaching, so that we would actually put effort in cultivating that path. So while engaging in the path, then you may face problems, and in such cases, then you will show forbearance. And also forbearance of those who cause trouble. And so then you will also develop enthusiasm. Enthusiasm cannot come through imposition. No one can actually make us oblige to practice the Dharma. it has to come on a voluntary basis. Willingness must be there on your part. If nobody can give any kind of make you obliged, make it an obligation for you to practice the Dharma. In our childhood, maybe when we do our studies, when we were studying in schools, maybe some force was there and we didn't really have much enthusiasm. But as you grow up and you give thought and you become more thinking, then you feel like actually doing your studies on your own. So if someone has given you some obligation to study, but it may not be so effective. So Second Tenshab Rinpoche or somebody has told me that when he was actually reciting text from memory in front of his teacher, the teacher would have the text in front of him, and then he was sitting right before the text, and actually because his eyes were good, he could look at the text that was on his teacher's table, so that when he was supposed to be reciting from memory, but when he was not able to do so, he could actually read the text on the table. So if you really do some practice and give some thought to the teaching, then you actually put these teachings into practice, then you will be able to do put some effort. And so once you are able to put some effort, I usually say that the Chinese people are hardworking. Wherever you are, in whichever country, you always set up some Chinatown. So even for this life, if we persevere, then we could achieve the things in life. And so similarly, when it comes to attaining realizations and experiences within our mind, through effort, hard work, you can actually achieve it. So for us, what we do is we give the responsibility of developing our realization and so forth to leave it to the Buddhas to work for us. That won't work. So what is enthusiasm? It is finding joy in what is wholesome. So harming other people and causing problems for them is not considered enthusiasm or joyous effort. So all effort that we put is not a joyous effort or zundu. So in order to put effort or joyous effort, we need to know the opposing factors. So I will not read the text for transmission of the reading. So what we need to overcome are the laziness. We mostly think about material progress and development because we are so engrossed in material development and material things. We are engrossed in watching televisions or watching some sports, and also when you take alcohol, you first smell it, and so what we use are our senses, the sensory perceptions, and then also within which is also the sensual pleasure of sex as well. So we are more or less attracted to these sensual objects and sensual experiences. So the existing modern education system,
so it is not adequate. So now, in the education field, we should include some some sort of education about internal value, irrespective of whether believer or non-believer. So, internal value based on faith, then for example, India, there are so many different faiths. If moral education based on faith, then what faith? The multi-religious country, difficult. And then furthermore, non-believer, then there's no way to educate these people. So only thing is the secular education about moral ethics. So,
the way we live our life seems to be related to this laziness. And then there is also the laziness where we are attached to the inferior. What? Inferior things. And then there is also the laziness where we put ourselves down, low self-esteem. So I usually say that Buddhism is not to scare people away. I usually tell this story that happened in Tibet. For those who are new, maybe this is a new story. So in Tibet there was a monastery, and somebody came to see the abbot of the monastery. And he said, when he arrived at the monastery, the abbot was not there in the monastery, and the visitor said that he wants to see the abbot, and he asked somebody in the monastery where the abbot had gone, and the person in the monastery said the abbot had gone to scare people in the town. So this is not totally wrong, because many of the teachers, when they give teachings, so people sometimes say that you have to make offerings to the Lama, and then if you go against the Lama's words, you will go to hell. And so that's not the way Buddhism should be introduced, by frightening people. So we have to actually make people feel delighted by talking about enlightenment, Bodhi. So even in terms of attaining liberation, when we talk about when we refer to the four attributes of cessation, they must give delight in our heart. So we must not make the Buddhism, the practice of Buddhism, based on fear. So I know somebody who actually developed some imbalance in the lung energy in the body, and why that happened, I asked, and because he said because he meditated on impermanence. So that should not be the result actually. And so when we introduce Buddhism, we have to introduce enlightenment, the great enlightenment of omniscient state of Buddhahood, and then with that understanding of the goal that we have to reach, then we need to lead people to the meditation, through the meditation on impermanence and death, and the other teachings that are taught in the Lamrim. And so we should have self-confidence and willingness, and there should be a willingness on your part voluntarily to engage in the path. So in its opposing factors are explained as laziness, attraction to what is harmful, and despising oneself out of despondency. So we have all these three types of laziness. Because of attachment to the pleasurable taste of idleness, because of craving for sleep, and because of having disillusion, no disillusion with the misery of cyclic existence, laziness grows very strong and meshed in the snare of disturbing conceptions. Because we are attached we have this kind of clinging and attachment to the sensual objects, such as beautiful forms, interesting sounds, and the taste, texture, and also our near and dear ones, as well as wealth and so forth. Then, because of that attachment on these different things, we become averse to those who are seen to be hindering our pleasure. Usually when we see people who are full of negative emotions, full of like hate, love and hate emotions, we consider them to be quite successful in life, efficient. This is how our society seems to be going around, going about with their business. And so, enmeshed in the snare of these different conceptions, I have entered the snare of birth. Why am I still not aware that I live in the mouth of the Lord of Death? Do I not see that he is systematically slaughtering my species? Whoever remains soundly asleep surely behaves like a buffalo with a butcher. So when death befalls us, we become old and we lose our senses, and the senses are weakened and we are not able to function properly. So regarding myself, of course, I have come of age to the point where I might be at the stage of losing this and weakening of the senses. But because of my training since childhood, I still am quite clear in my mind. So when having blocked off every escape route, the Lord of Death is looking for someone to kill. How can I enjoy eating? And likewise, how can I enjoy sleep? So when death befalls us, we have to leave everything behind, whether food or works and so forth. But as said by Pabongkaba Rinpoche, and then Gongdan Rinpoche also has said that these worldly things or works has no end. And so, as you do one, the number of works increase, and therefore, is it not better to leave everything at once? So for as long as death is actually approaching, then I shall accumulate merits. Even if I then put a stop to laziness, what will be the use? That is not the time. So the end of birth is death. At the most, we may live 100 years. So to live 120, 30 years is almost impossible. So death is uncertain, although it's inevitable, and many of the causes or factors which help us live can become causes of death. When you die, nothing will help, not money, wealth, not the near and dear ones, family, not your name and fame, but what will help is your whatever virtuous practices you have done. So everyone knows that this body is left behind. So the body ceases. And so the more acquaintance you have made on the basis of this gross or coarse state of mind, you'll be also able to leave some imprint on the subtle mind. And therefore, the subtle mind is the one which goes from one life to the next. And so, whatever imprint you have left on your mind through study or hearing the teachings and also reflecting and meditation, if you have left any imprint through these means, because the next life will be there. And therefore, we can see, even in children, how the certain imprints manifest in their life. And so, even as twins, we can see differences happening to them, to the twins at the time of their death. Even people of the same parentage are different. So, as we grow up, we are influenced by our environment, by people, other circumstances, and so forth. And then what is quite obvious or clear in our early childhood becomes more dormant. So there are people in Tibetan society who can remember their past lives, people who when they are at the age of 3, 4, 5. But after that, it seems that it kind of diminishes, the memory of the past life diminishes. So this shows that the imprints left on our subtle mind has some effect in this life as well. And so our near and dear ones, loved ones, our enemies, or name, fame, wealth, honor, and so forth, will not help at the time of death. So the 8 worldly conditions, becoming unhappy when you gain something, unhappy when you lose something, and becoming happy when you have honor, and not unhappy when you lose them, and so forth, will not help at the time of death. So we all know that we are going to die. And so when you look from that perspective, all these wealth and riches that you have are give you more fear, worries, and also you'll be separated from your near and dear ones, the loved ones. And then you leave this, even you separate from this body. And so at that time, if you have left some imprint, positive imprint on your mind, that is what will help you. So sometimes when around the time of death, some people have some vision of lower realms of existence. And then they become very unhappy, very worried. So tormented by the memory of wrongdoings and hearing the sound of hell, in terror I shall clothe my body in excrement. What virtue can I do in such delirious state? So if you have no forbearance, so it says in verse number 13, much harm befalls those with little forbearance. So I've met people who have survived the Second World War in Japan because they have gone through much suffering. They are really strong people, whereas the new generation are not that kind of strong. And so we'll die, and death is not certain, is uncertain when death will come. And therefore, this kind of human body that we have found, in which this life we have a very powerful intelligence, and this should be used to go across the ocean of suffering. So just surviving their body, even though animals are able to do in this life, they're able to search for their own food, whereas humans have this very typical or unique intelligence. So the animals use their 5 senses very well, but if we also remain like the animals, using only our senses, the sensorial faculties, and not our intelligence, which is unique, then we are not making ourselves worth being humans. So of course, even if in this life, even if we may not have the different needs of life, still by using our mind, we can live happily. In Barcelona, in Spain, once I was in a monastery in Montserrat. So I was told about there was a monk who had actually lived up in the hills as a hermit for 5 years. So the people in the monastery told me this, and he came to see me, and I asked him, during those 5 years as a hermit, with very little provisions, not even having tea, but poor quality food. So I asked what he was doing during those 5 years, and he said he was meditating on love and compassion. So when he said that, I mean, there was a special, very special facial expression, a twinkling in the eyes, and so he didn't have proper food. There was no entertainment around, and no sound, no music. So he gave up everything, all the essential objects. He gave up, but meditated on love or mercy. But he had a very special glow in his face. So, as human beings, by using this human body, the boat of human body and life, and using our intelligence, we should be able to make some difference from the animals. If we live like animals, it's a great mistake. And then if you become totally disheartened, so in the earlier, the text mentioned the laziness, attraction to harmful objects, and then despising oneself. And so here, in order to overcome disheartened feeling, then it shows the text goes through the practice of equaling and exchanging self and others. So, verse number 16. Without indulging in despondency, I should gather the supports for enthusiasm and earnestly take control of myself. Then, by seeing the equality between self and others, I should practice exchanging self and others. And next verse. I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? How the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. And so, it is said in the sutra that even an insect, if it were to put effort, it can become enlightened. And so, in our case, we have found this human life. We are not born in a country or place where there is no Buddha Dharma and other conducive factors. So we have to use it properly. If they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. It will be so if I do not forsake the Bodhisattva way of life. Why should someone like myself, who has been born in the human race, not attain awakening, since I am able to recognize what is beneficial and what is of harm? So in Mahayana, Uttara Tantra, and so forth, it is said that the negative states of mind or the defilements in our mind are not intrinsic in the mind. Why? Because the intrinsic nature of the mind is cognitive and clarity, and therefore it has that quality of knowing things. Therefore it is called awareness or cognition. And so the defilements are not intrinsic in the mind. So it's not in nature of mind, intrinsic nature of mind. Whereas, and also our ignorance is not in the intrinsic nature of mind. Whereas the opposite of it, which is knowledge, cognition, awareness, it is the nature of the mind itself. And so, when you are ignorant about alphabet, for example, the knowledge, once you gain the knowledge of alphabet, you know alphabet, then that knowledge counters the ignorance. So long as the ignorance is there, ignorance about the alphabet is there, you are not aware of the alphabet. But once you understand, you know, or you learn the alphabet, then you have that knowledge which counters that ignorance. And therefore, as long as there is ignorance, it has its opposing factor, which is knowledge. So the mere nature of the mind is mere knowledge and or cognition and clarity. That itself is neither positive or wholesome nor negative, but it's neutral. So when you are full of ignorance, then the mind becomes unknowledgeable, or the unclarity of knowledge remains there. So when the mind is accompanied by negative emotions, the afflictive emotions, then it is called afflicted. Whereas when the virtuous state of mind, such as compassion, is developed, and then the mind becomes compassionate, because of the accompaniment of this compassion, the mental factor. And so the mind has that innate potential or the nature of knowing things. So you do not have to put effort for that quality. And so the defilements are temporary, adventitious, and then we have the basic potential for knowledge and qualities, positive qualities. The powers and the positive qualities of the Buddha are mostly of the qualities of mind itself, which has that quality of knowledge. So with regard to omniscience, because the mind has this innate nature of cognition, the cognitive nature, therefore we have that potential or the seed for complete knowledge, omniscience. Nevertheless, it frightens me to think that I may have to give away my arms and legs. Verse number 20, page 79. So of course we may have to accumulate merit and wisdom over 300 countless aeons. So when we think about accumulating such vast amount of merit and wisdom as we progress along the path, beginning with the first countless eon, merit accumulated in the first countless eon, and then the second countless eon during the first 7 impure grounds of bodhisattvas, and then the third the countless eons of merits during the last 3 bodhisattva grounds. It feels like we have lots of work to do, but we must not feel discouraged. So the suffering that we experience, of course, is there, but in order to develop the powerful antidotes, the counterforce to the cause of suffering can be developed in this kind of life, a human life. And even in its text, Nagabodhi or somebody has said that even those in paradise, like the Sukhavati paradise, actually admire the human body of this world. So far we have actually given in to the self-cherishing attitude and also our grasping at true existence of self and others. And then what has become of us is what we have now, what we experience. Whereas if you actually develop self-cherishing attitude, overcome through self-cherishing attitude and grasping at true existence and self through their counterforce, then we'll be able to overcome them. So the 7 billion people on this earth, nobody is spared from suffering, worries, troubles. So of course there may be difference in degrees of problems, but if you ask somebody when they are relaxed, then you will hear all their problems. Of course, if somebody is rather dull, maybe they don't have much feeling. But as humans, we have this powerful intelligence, and also we have very powerful memory, thinking about the future. Dogs and cats, if they have no immediate threat or danger, they will just relax. Whereas we as humans, we learn about the past generations, our past experiences, and also we have we can think about future experiences. And accordingly, because of these memories and the anticipations, we have attachment and aversion. So, even though we may be amidst problems, but in our mind, deep in our mind, if you feel that I have lived my life rather well, if we are able to actually accept the suffering and problems and make it worth for ourselves to live, even as we suffer, then we feel happy. So if you are not peaceful, then you will not be able to keep peace of mind. So happiness has to do with internal mind. For animals, maybe they draw more happiness or joy, pleasure based on senses, the 5 senses. Whereas as humans, when we are able to use our mind to think about, to apply the antidotes to our problems, and we are able to use our mind properly to accept suffering and turn it into our favorable conditions, like as we say in the mind training text, the 7-point mind training, the problems of these 5 degenerations can be turned into positive or favorable conditions. And also, as it is said by one master, that I'm not happy if I'm praised, or if I'm if I'm pleasant, but if I'm happy when I have suffering. So pain and pleasure has to do mainly with our mind, experiences of mind. So that in turn has to do with our own way of thinking, whether we are able to overwhelm our suffering, and also to turn these misfortunes into our favorable conditions, take them as blessings in disguise, then we'll be happy. Without discrimination between what is heavy and what is light, I am reduced to fear through confusion. For over countless myriads of eons, I have been cut, stabbed, burnt, and flayed alive innumerable times, but I have not awakened. Yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. It is like suffering of having an incision made in order to remove and destroy greater pain. Even doctors eliminate illness with unpleasant medical treatments. So in order to overcome manifold sufferings, I should be able to put up with some discomfort. So if there were no cessation, the true cessation, the Buddha would not have taught about the true suffering. Because there is a cessation, there is a possibility to attain cessation. Therefore, the Buddha actually gave teachings on suffering, true suffering. If we are not able to go beyond suffering, if we are not able to go free ourselves from suffering, then the Buddha may have not taught about suffering. He may have said, just relax, as sometimes our doctors do tell their patients. So we also sometimes use tranquilizers. So you are wise if you are able to use the teaching of tranquilizing, the tranquilizing teaching to overcome our suffering. So maybe if we do some surgery and remove the part of the brain which feels sensation, pain, then perhaps we may not have suffering, but that's not the case. Yet the Supreme Physician does not employ common medical treatments such as these. Page 80, with an extremely gentle technique, he remedies all the great ills. In certain religious traditions, there are practice of penitence, giving lots of pain to the body, and also plucking our hair and so forth. So in the Jain practitioners, amongst Jain practitioners, they have these kind of practices of non-violence, which is very good. And then they also plug their hair. And also there are people who put lamps or pierce their bodies to offer lamps. But the Buddha, what he had taught us is to practice generosity. And for example, even the practice of generosity, you have to begin with offering small things. And as you become more and more acquainted with giving, then you reach a point where you can even give your body to others at such a stage when there is no sense of loss. And then you can give body. So not right away. At the beginning, the guide of the world encourages the giving of such things as food. Later, when accustomed to this, one may progressively start to give away even one's flesh. And then there is also teaching where it says that everything is like a dream, like a mirage, and magical illusions, and so forth. Having forsaken all transgression, there would be no suffering. Page number 80. And due to wisdom, there would be no lack of joy. But now my mind is affected by mistaken conceptions, which means grasping at true existence of things. And my body is caused harm by unwholesome deeds. As their bodies are happy due to their merits, and their minds are happy due to their wisdom, even if they remain in cyclic existence for the sake of others, why would the compassionate ones even be upset? Due to the strength of awakening mind, the Bodhisattvas consumes their previous transgressions and harvest oceans of merit. Hence, they are said to excel the Shravakas. So when you are actually, when you have this great courage to work for others, however much suffering you may have to endure, and such as even making such prayers, just prayers like, as long as space remains and as long as sentient beings remain, may I too live to dispel the suffering of the world. And also in this text, it is said that here on page 81, so having mounted the horse of the awakening mind that dispels all discouragement and weariness, who, when they know of this mind that proceeds from joy to joy, would ever lapse into despondency. So if you really put some effort and you gain some taste of this kind of bodhicitta, where you only think of helping, working for the benefit of others, then of course you will see the benefit of it, and we will aspire to develop it further. That supports when working for the sake of living beings, aspiration, steadfastness, joy and rest, as aspiration is developed through fear of misery and by contemplating the benefits of aspiration itself. Thus, in order to increase my enthusiasm, I should strive to abandon its opposing forces. So with regard to bodhicitta, for those of lesser or duller faculty, inferior faculty, they use the method called the sevenfold cause and effect instruction for developing bodhicitta. But whereas those of superior faculty would use the means of equaling and exchanging self and others. And so, as it said in this text, which intelligent person would feel discouraged and weary, knowing that the bodhicitta, the awakening mind, mounting on the horse of awakening mind, will lead from joy to joy. The supports when so with regards to the practice, verse number 31 says, talks about aspiration, steadfastness, joy and rest. So verse number 32 and 33. And 34 and 35. Likewise, I shall have to realize many excellent qualities of myself and others. In order to attain each of these qualities alone, I may have to acquaint myself with its cause until an ocean of aeon is exhausted. So if you are able to cultivate bodhicitta and develop it within yourself and also engage in the bodhisattva practices, you have this delight in your heart to engage in these practices. So since the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have actually engaged in these practices for eons and eons, how would I expect to attain the goal of enlightenment within a short period of time, and feeling disheartened with all kinds of, with the kind of difficulties that I encounter on the path? So verse number 37 done, 38. Verse number 42. 43 down shows the being delighted in the causes leading to higher planes of existence, or the paradise and so forth. And then so verse number 45 mentions Vajradhwaja. 46 mentions the sutra of which is part of the Avatamsaka Sutra. So it says, therefore, I should aspire for virtue and with great respect acquaint myself with it. Having undertaken the wholesome in the manner of Vajradhwaja, I should then proceed to acquaint myself with self-confidence. So when you go about with the practice of the Dharma, such as these, you have to first check whether something is realistic or not, and achievable or not. And therefore, it says in this verse number 47, first of all, I should examine well what is to be done. And when you see that the goal can be achieved and it's realistic, then you should determine to achieve it. Whereas if you are not so sure right from the beginning, and then when you engage or when you actually enter the path, you feel disheartened, discouraged, and that is not good. And to see whether I can pursue it or cannot undertake it. If I'm able, it is best to leave it. Unable, it is best to leave it. But once I have started, I must not withdraw. So when you find that you can actually achieve that goal, if I do, then this habit will continue in other lives. And so here they called developing self-confidence is also showed. So self-confidence should be applied to wholesome actions, to overcoming the disturbing conceptions, and my ability to do this. So if something is achievable and it's worth striving, then you have to put effort. Thinking I alone shall do it is the self-confidence of action. Powerless, this mind is disturbed. Their mind disturbed. People in this world are unable to benefit themselves. Therefore, I shall do it for them. Since, unlike these beings, unlike me, these beings are incapable. So sometimes we put so much effort in some trivial things, So it's that the pleasure that we draw from such a huge amount of effort is very small. So which is in turn a pleasure which is changeable, suffering. And therefore, I, who am working for the liberation or freedom from this conditioned existential suffering, and furthermore, to work, I who am working for omniscience, since I'm working for lasting happiness, therefore it's not going to work for me to feel despondent and discouraged, and therefore build up your courage. And self-confidence must be built. Even if others are doing the inferior tasks, why should I sit there doing nothing? I do not do those tasks because of self-importance. It would be best for me to have no such pride. So with regard to self-confidence, it should not be arrogance. You should have pride to be able that you will be able to achieve your goal, but it should not turn into arrogance, and where you put others down. When crows encounter a dying snow, they will act as though they were eagles. So being under the sway of our negative emotions. Likewise, if my self-confidence is weak, like that, I shall be injured by the slightest downfall. How can those who, out of faint-heartedness, have given up trying to find liberation because of this deficiency? Yet even the greatest obstacle will find it hard to overcome, one with a firm mind. Therefore, with a steady mind, I shall overcome all faults. So here, you have to see the disadvantage of the negative emotions and see the advantage and of the antidote or the counterforce which put end to them. And therefore, you have to whip up your courage. So our self-grasping attitude, the notion of some kind of a grasping, some kind of solidity in things, and also on the basis of that, our extreme self-centered attitude. Because of these two, so far what we have gone through is suffering, all kinds of unwanted experiences. From now on, you should think that I will work against these two negative forces by developing the wisdom of selflessness and cherishing others more than oneself, like weapons. Therefore, with steady mind, I shall overcome all faults. If I am defeated by a fall, my wish to vanquish the three realms will become a joke. And next shows how you should have courage and self-confidence. I will conquer everything and nothing at all shall conquer me. I, a child of lion-like conqueror, shall remain self-confident in this way. So the afflicted kind of pride or arrogance will not help us, but we are actually going against that, combating it. Whoever has self-importance is destroyed by it, is disturbed and has no self-confidence. For those with self-confidence do not succumb to the power of the enemy, whereas the former are under the sway of the enemy of self-importance. Inflated by the disturbing conceptions of my self-importance, I shall be led by it to the lower realms. It destroys the joyous festival of being human. I shall become a slave, eating the food of others. Stupid, ugly, feeble, and everywhere disrespected, tough people bloated by conceit are also counted among the self-important. Tell me, what is more pathetic than this? whoever seizes self-confidence in order to conquer the enemy of self-confidence, they are the self-confident ones, the victorious heroes. And in addition, whoever definitely conquers the spread of this enemy, self-importance, completely wins the fruit of the conqueror, fulfilling the wishes of the world. If I find myself amidst a crowd of disturbing conceptions, I shall enjoy them in 1,000 ways. So these negative emotions or disturbing conceptions, the moment they arise in us, they disturb our peace of mind, whereas love, compassion, and so forth give us calmness and peace of mind. Anger, arrogance, and competitive attitude are not negative ones, are not beneficial to us. It cannot help others as well, and so you are disturbed. Your mental peace is disturbed. And so I find myself amidst the crowd of disturbings. I shall enjoy them in 1,000 ways. Like a lion among foxes, I will not be affected by this disturbing host. Just as men will guard their eyes. So we can see how much we are ruined by our own negative emotions, these disturbing emotions. We can see it in the world. Our attachment and anger, love-hate attitudes actually brings us ruin and ruins us. So likewise, so just as men will guard their eyes when great danger and turmoil occur, since harm comes through our motivation, therefore we have to give up this negative motivation which gives rise to harm or suffering. Likewise, I shall never be swayed by disturbances within my mind, even at times of great strife. It would be better for me to be burnt, to have my head cut off, and to be killed. So those things which actually bring suffering to us, we still strive to achieve them, to engage in them. But what we must do is that those things which actually brings about lasting peace and happiness, rather than ever bowing down to those ever-present disturbing conceptions. So likewise, in all the situations, I should do nothing other than what is fit. Just like those who yearn for the fruits of play, Bodhisattvas are attracted to whatever task they may do. They never has enough. It only brings him joy. Although people work in order to be happy, it is uncertain whether or not they will find it. So this kind of psychophysical aggregate that we have is a source of suffering, because they are the results of our karma and negative emotions. So when we actually, of course, work in our practice of the Dharma, we may feel tired, and therefore it is necessary to take rest, because this body is not perfect. So although people work in order to be happy, it is uncertain whether or not they will find it. But how can those whose work itself is joy find happiness unless they do it? If I feel that I never have enough sensual objects which are like honey smeared upon a razor's edge, then why should I ever feel that I have enough merit which ripens in happiness and peace? So verse number 67 and 68. And So understanding that these disturbing emotions and our karma actually cause damage to us, harm to us. So just as an old warrior approaches the swords of an enemy upon the battlefront, so shall I avoid the weapons of disturbing conceptions and skillfully bind this enemy. So whatever virtues practice we engage in, we should always be alert in doing, cultivating them. So, for example, in the process of cultivating single-pointed concentration, we come to a stage where of attaining physical pliancy, and therefore we feel light, physically light, and serviceable to do our practice. So this completes the 7th chapter. So it's 12 o'clock, the clock, and we finished the 7th chapter.
Ama Senjen Tanje, Deda, Tenju, Jingendo Tanje, Tato,
Tongwa, Chanju Semba, Kana Sushu, Deda, Quinge, Melam, Chuchi. There can be windows somebody. La Quinge Chess of Talo Jinka, what did that Tanje, Rabdongo, the Fisher, what Tanje, Moa Kona Chok. I gave it all, Digging, some Bochi, Rabdongo, I gave it our conjunction, also get Chemelam concept, there's something that you do chow, so now don't choose. Show some 2G to them, then they top their jello met into that jacket, then be Melam gang man, you drop. What happened?